All right, Josh, you broke the story for NBC News about the Saudi government's new plan to change their story. Please fill us in.
Well, Stephanie, we know that a plan is being discussed by the Saudis, in part along with the U.S., to essentially admit some type of culpability in the death of Mr. Khashoggi. That, of course, means acknowledging that this journalist, Jamal Khashoggi, is dead and is not alive, having left the consulate, as the Saudis have been claiming for the last 2 weeks. Now, we don't know exactly how the Saudis are going to spin this, but we know that as Secretary of State Pompeo was flying to Riyadh in the last 24 hours, the U.S. was already aware that he was essentially going there to have discussions about how the Saudis were going to come out and say, okay, what we had been saying originally is not true. We've discovered that he actually was killed, but that there will be some type of off-ramp that allows the Saudis to essentially say that Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and King Salman, his father, were not culpable in this, that they did not order it, that they were not aware that this was happening, and to essentially blame this on lower-level rogue operatives. Something happened, it went wrong, but certainly the leadership at the top had nothing to do with it. Now, whether that has any credibility, whether anyone in the United States is able to accept that, or other parts of the world, and whether that contradicts intelligence that Turkey, the United States, and other countries might already have about the run-up to this incident and how it's been handled in the last couple of weeks, that remains to be seen, Stephanie.
All right, David, do you buy this idea that the Crown Prince had no knowledge of this kind of operation? I mean, it sounds a bit like Tony Soprano, who knew nothing. Like, yes, he himself might not have shot the gun, but he certainly ordered it.
No, it's absurd. The facts that you outlined, 2 private jets coming from Saudi Arabia with members of the Saudi security service going into a Saudi consulate, one of them being a forensic expert who came with a bone saw. It's very clear that this was sanctioned. It's very clear what the purpose of this was. And now what we're in is a period where the Saudi government, apparently working with the Trump administration, is trying to come up with the best story that they can plausibly sell. I think one of the things that's really remarkable about this, given the weight of the evidence, is that the President of the United States seems to be playing press secretary for the King of Saudi Arabia. It was the president who offered up the rogue agents theory of this thing even before the Saudis started to float this idea. Clearly that came from his discussion with King Salman. And, you have Mike Pompeo sitting there in these cheery pictures, despite the fact he only got 15 minutes with the king and 30 minutes with Prince Mohammed bin Salman, that, is trying to put a good face on this thing. I think that's appalling. You have the death of a U.S. resident, a journalist for the Washington Post, brutally murdered, and you've got the United States covering for it. Final thing I'd say, though, and this is with reference to your clip of Lindsey Graham, Marco Rubio has also come out against this. There is a growing bipartisan consensus in both houses of the United States Congress that what the Saudis have done is crossed a red line, that the MBS is going to have to pay a price. The relationship with Saudi Arabia is going to pay a price. It is going to be a long time recovering, I think, because both parties are so outraged by what has happened.
All right, Congressman, to David's point, I want to play what Marco Rubio said this morning.
This is going to alter the relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia for the foreseeable future. What those specific measures are, obviously, is going to be up for debate, but they'll be strong and they'll be meaningful. Congress will act. We'll see what the administration does. It sounds to me like, in the end of the day, they will also follow suit.
Sounds good. So did Lindsey Graham. Do you believe this?
No, I don't. I want to see action. Sometimes in politics, you have a moral dilemma staring you straight in the face, and this is one of those. This is not the first U.S. ally to kill somebody. This is not the first time an American president has practiced realpolitik. But there are times in life and in politics where a moral dilemma is right in front of you, and you have to choose. And Congress is going to have to do this because the president will not. And those guys talk a good game, but when has Marco Rubio or Lindsey Graham ever ever stood up to this president on a moral issue and said no more. And they are out of session, and we are not back till after the election. If you want an argument for changing control of Congress, that's one, because you need real oversight and you need real independence, and the Article 1 branch ought to do something if the president is going to take a dive for these killers in Saudi Arabia.
AB, what's your take here? Because we know that the president has close ties with Saudi Arabia. Jared Kushner does. I mean, you can look at video back in the day of the president going, I really like those guys buying apartments for $30 million, $40 million. And it's the president leading this narrative, could be rogue killers.
Oh, I know. Look, I think that what you've said is correct. If you look at how much he and his son-in-law have invested in this relationship, combined with his business dealings going back,
with him,
right, and then the business current and past that has helped the Trump organization at times when they were really, really in a cash jam. It's obvious that the president has actually made it perfectly clear to us that he intends to continue to honor that relationship and not let American values get in the way. And he basically explained that in his interview in 60 Minutes the other night, that when it comes to Chairman Kim and President Putin and the Saudi royal family, he's not going to let all these processes and our systems and our values get in the way. It's really that he has a goal in mind, and it's all transactional. He's taken sanctions off the table. He's taken any leverage from an arms deal off the table. And he's basically said, I'll find another way to deal with it, but I believe them. The thing is, the congressman is right. The question really is not now. Lindsey Graham is clearly going on Fox to speak directly to President Trump because he's getting no hearing with him about what a bad guy the Crown Prince is. He and Jared are not listening to Lindsey Graham, and so Lindsey Graham is going on the Fox audience to say, this is a bad guy, and he's embarrassed me and the president for sticking up for them all this time, and he has to go. That's very bold. It shows that he's desperate to break through, but they're going to have to follow up in the Congress. I was heartened to see Senator Todd Young of Indiana, who I've never seen come on TV since he was elected in 2016, come out last night and say sanctions need to be on the table. Mnuchin cannot go to the investor conference, and we need to consider canceling the weapons deal, but they're going to have to match that with action.
Do you feel bad in terms of political leadership when you've got CEOs across the board, take your pick, whether it's Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Rothschild, Viacom, not going to what Saudi Arabia likes to call the Davos of the Middle East? And Steve Mnuchin's still potentially going.
Yes, that's should be off the table.
Are the people steering our moral leadership corporate CEOs, bankers nonetheless?
Well, good for them. And I'll tell you what, they deserve credit for that. But it's not a substitute for the United States government taking a stand. And there are easy steps here we should take. Absolutely. Mnuchin should not be going to that conference. We should ground the relationship the way you would after a plane crash until you know what's going on. We should suspend the arms sales. By the way, we should be asking very tough questions about what the Saudis are doing with our arms in Yemen. I mean, this whole relationship needs to be re-examined, and we should not, maybe Saudi Arabia is too big to fail, but MBS is not. And we should take very seriously what our long-term interests here are with this particular Crown Prince and his actions, because we own this. And this cannot just be one more moral issue we blow by. A man is dead, and the explanation they're getting ready to float out is just doesn't pass the smell test. Why the bone saw? Where is the body? Produce these 15 individuals who flew to Turkey and flew
because
right
I
out.
normally
Let's
travel with a bone
them.
saw and an autopsy specialist. David, moments ago, the president tweeted, I have no financial interest in Saudi Arabia or Russia for that matter. If the president's watching, I want to clear something up. I never said you had financial interest in either of those places. I don't believe you've invested in either of them. The question is, do they have a financial interest in you? David, the Washington Post says the president is overvaluing our relationship with Saudi Arabia. We don't need them as much as he puts out there.
Well, that's absolutely true. Saudi Arabia needs us much more than we need them. They need us with regard to their tensions with Iran. They need us with regard to their oil markets. They need us in a whole host of ways. They're a much smaller economy. They're much less influential. And they've been playing this like they've got the strong hand. I think that goes back to your point. I think the Saudis have a lot of economic ties with Trump, with Trump's company, with Jared Kushner's company. company, just as the Russians do. I think that clearly influences him. He has said as much on national television, as you pointed out, with regard to the apartments he likes that they buy and so forth. The ties are long-standing, and the President of the United States is essentially saying, look, the support of the White House is for sale or rent. Come, if you've got a tie, I will support you. I don't care about morality. I think the congressman has it right on the nose. I think this is a time for the Congress to stand up and make a stand, because I don't think the White House is going to lead the way on this thing, because the president is compromised. He's clearly compromised. He has taken the Saudi line on this, and it's insupportable. I mean, this is a really horrific case. There are other horrific cases associated with this Saudi regime, and something has got to give, because the United States has no place backing a regime that behaves in the way these guys have done.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.